Australia's highest-ranking police officer has revealed detectives are expected to have a regular presence at Gus Lamont's family homestead, with the complex investigation into his outback disappearance far from being solved.
A regular presence at Gus Lamont's family homestead. Think about that in this context.
I've asked them to leave. I've asked them to leave.
Out! You are trespassing! Get out!
I'm so sorry.
Get out! Are you deaf?
Okay. I was leaving.
Get out!
I was leaving.
Shut your face and get out!
Now, can you imagine the same treatment of officers on the scene as this reporter got? And also, do you think that the feelings towards the investigators are, we'd like to have you guys on the property, we feel reassured having you guys on the property, we want you guys on the property? And so what I think we're dealing with here are kind of mutually destructive entitlements. The one is the fact that law enforcement feel that they're entitled, given that they're dealing with a major crime and a major investigation, they're entitled to have access to that area and to monitor what is going on and to look around. In the same way, someone who lives somewhere feels that they are entitled to the free and unfettered use of their property. But that is something I want to discuss, just that idea in a lot more detail. What does it mean to be entitled? Are we dealing with entitlement in this story, and to what degree? What is the nature, the severity of the entitlement if it is present in this particular story?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
To be entitled means to believe that you are inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment. Now, someone who would definitely feel that way is someone like a king or a prince or a president, or someone who comes from a situation of privilege or prestige. It is natural that if you are used to privilege, that's the kind of thing you expect in different situations. Now, of the many cases I've covered, this one stands out for a number of reasons, but one reason above all, just the secrecy about everything. It's also a case where there's just one image, just a single photo of this little boy was ever released, is quite bizarre. More bizarre is the fact that literally no one from this apparently devastated family has ever stood in front of a camera in this high-profile case and said anything. Instead, they've sort of pushed someone else out there, given him a statement to read. And it doesn't seem because they are shy or intimidated. What we seem to be seeing is someone trying to avoid the cameras or treating the media with obvious scorn. Something else that's hard to avoid thinking about is the financial side. If there's money in this case, if there's privilege, it's often tied to large amounts of money. Well, just how large are we talking about? The money required to transition is fairly substantial, tens of thousands of dollars, just as the money required to double lawyer up isn't piffly either. So where does it come from? Now, although Josie Murray has emerged as the central figure in this story, we know very little about Josie's backstory until, that is, the Daily Mail's investigative piece revealed for the first time the secret past of Gus Lamont's intensely private grandparent Josie, and how Josie is the scion of an influential and very respected family. But before we get to Johnny Cabray's exclusive article, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button, and let's get started.
I think it's fair to assume that there's a lot more work to be done.
Police concluding yet another search for Gus Lamont. Major crime detectives spending the last 2 days scouring new areas of interest in South Australia's mid-north, both on and around Oak Park Station near Yunta, where Gus lived with his mother and grandparents.
According to the Daily Mail, Josie Murray, 75, has remained largely out of view as the desperate search and subsequent investigation gripped the nation. But there have been no public appeals, no interviews, no social media statements, and only a handful of rare sightings beyond the gates of the sprawling farm in South Australia. But the intriguing thing isn't just that Josie has tried to keep a low profile. Shannon has kept an even lower profile, and Jess an even lower profile still. In fact, I don't think we've seen a single photograph of her in the past 5 months, which takes some doing. I mean, given that she is the missing boy's biological mother, that's quite an impressive feat. One might think it would be hard for her not to be out there either searching or appealing for help or both. But it could be that someone else is also calling the shots. Someone else has decided how to deal with the situation, or more to the point, not deal with it. We get a much deeper sense of what is really going on with this family, and Josie in particular, when we dig deeper into the, I'm not sure if it's the patriarch or the matriarch story, but suffice it to say, Josie appears to be the person in the pound seats in this story, the person calling the shots, doesn't it? According to the Daily Mail, as detectives continue working to unravel what has really happened to little Gus, Daily Mail can reveal Josie comes from a lineage once held in the highest regards. We can put those words on screen. Josie comes from a lineage once held in the highest regard. And what implications does that have for this story and the people in it? Josie's mother, Janine, was awarded a Medal of the Order of Australia for her service to the community, while Josie's father, Alexander, was celebrated as a war hero. Now, I think it is a huge insight into this case, this idea that the family was held in the highest regard, that they were really loved and respected, that they did incredible service to their communities, that the social currency of this particular family that Josie comes from is so high. So what are some of those huge insights that we get from this knowledge, from this particular aspect? Well, firstly, the Murrays, as we've seen, have tremendous social currency in the area. You can't seem to find a single person, a neighbor, a friend, who can say anything negative about them, with one exception, Josh. Josh was apparently not good enough for their daughter, and that often happens when daughters come from privilege and prestige. Now, if we go back to that definition, what is it to be entitled? Well, it is believing oneself to be inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment. Now, you might say, I don't think it's fair to even use this word in the context of these people. But when you have a daughter and you say, I don't really think you're good enough for my daughter, aren't you saying, well, I believe that she is deserving of someone special. She is deserving of someone better than you are. She is inherently deserving of someone who comes from whatever better situation. Isn't that an entitled approach? And in some ways it's understandable, especially when you're dealing with your daughter. You want the best for that person. But what if your daughter loves someone and she thinks this person is the right person for her, and you want to overrule that and say, no, I feel entitled to make a decision here that overrides your decision. I think you are deserving of better treatment, which indirectly suggests you might be feeling the same way about yourself in a certain situation. Do you see what I'm getting at? In the movie Wuthering Heights, Catherine Earnshaw feels that she is going to degrade herself if she's with Heathcliff. Is that a case of a kind of class entitlement or snobbery, or what would you call that? But now, in the same way that the Murrays didn't want to lose their daughter to Josh, if that's the case, did they want to lose their treasure because of Gus? When you are from a wealthy, well-to-do family, that does come with certain entitlements and a certain sense of entitlement. In a real sense, you feel you have a right to certain things that are yours, which often starts to blur over to things that might not be yours. Now, according to the Daily Mail, Josie's late father, Alexander, was an army sergeant listed on the World War II honours roll. Originally from England, Alexander moved to Mount Bryan as a child, enlisted in 1941, aged 23, and served in the 227 Infantry Battalion. The seemingly stoic occupant of Oak Park Station inherited the sprawling farmstead through marriage to Shannon, the next in line of the Pfeiffer family. And doesn't there seem to be an almost military-style stoicism about this family, even in the face of a tragedy like this? We also saw another side to that stoicism during Snakegate, which didn't that feel more militaristic and emotional than someone who's calm or reserved? Did it seem particularly stoic, that response? Because there was a glaring mismatch in that moment from the controlled, calm reticence that we've seen in the face of Gus's disappearance to what felt at times like an almost unhinged person roaring at full breast furiously at a female reporter who was quietly retreating anyway. It seemed to suggest that that stoicism on display was just that, a display. Meanwhile, underneath, isn't there a volcano of stewing fears, anxieties, and other emotions? And if that's the case, then what we're seeing is two things. We're seeing a surface that suggests something, whereas buried underneath is something else, worming with anxiety and other things, a steaming pile of something else that's going on. But there's also something else to take note of within the family archive. According to the Daily Mail, records show Josie's father married Janine Heath in 1948 at St John's Church in Toorak, Victoria, with their South Australian guest list printed in the local paper. And the names just go on and on and on. Again, just look at the social currency that's on display here. According to the Daily Mail, Alexander and Janine were married for 52 years before Alexander died in 2000, 26 years ago, aged 78. 3 years after that, Janine was awarded the Order of Australia, quite a big deal, for her service to the community, particularly through the Gumaracha District Soldiers Memorial Hospital Day Centre. Wow, what a mouthful. Shortly after, she moved interstate to Orbost in Victoria to be closer to her daughter Shannon. Now, what we see here is a fairly high degree of dedication between parents and their children, certainly on Shannon's side of the equation. One might even say that there's enmeshment present here in the sense that what we see is the properties of different families when you're dealing with farms are effectively consolidated and enmeshed, which means you as the owners of those properties, also the person who lives on those properties, you can't just split up if the relationship sours or if something goes wrong. Even if you wanted to split up, it wouldn't be that quick or that easy. According to the Daily Mail, while Josie's hometown and Oak Park Station, where Shannon grew up, were around 340 kilometers apart, the pair shared mutual connections through farming circles and eventually crossed paths. They later married and had one daughter, Jessica. Now, it's interesting that Oak Park Station isn't actually part of Josie's heritage, not originally, but actually Shannon's heritage. So you can see how it would be very difficult, especially for an older person, to want to give that up, even if it was arguably the right thing to do. And then there's this part that is really quite interesting. According to the Daily Mail, Josie and this young family moved between various sheep stations, and what they were doing was Josie, who was Robert at the time, was working his way up to management before that's Josie and Shannon, relocated to Oak Park to help run the family's sheep farming business. It is believed that Josie transitioned shortly after Shannon's father passed away, and by 2015, this is also important, the name of the property deeds had been changed to Josie's. By 2015, the name on the property deeds had been changed to Josie's. In other words, Oak Park Station, on paper, legally, actually belongs to Josie. And so Josie's holding all the power in the situation. Isn't it interesting that Robert turns into Josie only after inheriting the farm from Shannon? Why couldn't Robert transition before that? And if Robert did transition before that, do you think Josie would still have inherited anything? And what this indicates is perhaps the idea that Robert kept Shannon's father under particular illusion about who he/she was, all with a particular outcome in mind. and didn't she succeed in getting the outcome that she wanted? Now, whether you want to call that living a lie or keeping up a pretense, it is nevertheless a kind of manipulation, isn't it? To give someone a particular impression of yourself when you know it's not who you really are. And in Josie's case, not even close. But it also shows to what extent Josie could be stoic and suck it up if there was cheddar on the line. And aren't we in a similar situation now? A lot of treasure could be lost if, for example, Gus's body is found, and if that discovery turns out to be inculpatory in some way. The authorities seem to think it might be. Now, it's also a very unusual situation because you have this family legacy, this family held in the highest regard, and then someone in the family doing something that is, how can one put it, probably in the conservative farming community, not very traditional. Also, farmers are typically masculine, and farmers, especially sheep farmers, I don't know, I would imagine probably prefer having sons in order to shoulder that burden of physical work and being out in the field. So wanting to be a woman in that context is somewhat unusual, wouldn't you say? Back to the Daily Mail. Josie was living as Robert Murray. Josie is a biological male who later transitioned to female when Josie first met Shannon. Now, Josie grew up in Mount Crawford, a small town in the Adelaide Hills in South Australia, and attended Birdwood Primary alongside a sister. But Josie clearly has a very strong and a very clear sense of self, and a stoicism which appears to be immune to criticism, a stoicism that has been relied on for years before these events. And so this, I think, is a potential insight to draw from all of that backstory. We can see how that stoicism is a natural baseline for this family, for Josie in particular, but also for this family, even in an excruciating situation like this. But if there's one thing in the world that is going to test one's stoicism to the limit, it's having human remains hidden on your property. If that is the case here, that is going to haunt that property and this family forever. And no amount of stoicism is going to change that or make that reality go away.
Police today turning their attention to a new Mid-North homestead a few dozen kilometres from Gus's home where he vanished in September. This property also owned by a relative of the 4-year-old.
Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. This obviously is my opinion. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.